presents Holiday 95.
There is something profoundly unsettling to me about a mall after hours. These places that we designed for community become something else entirely when the crowds disperse and go to bed. The fluorescent lights still hum their ominously intimidating drone. The mannequins still locked, frozen in place, mocking human nature. The energy just altogether shifts, and what remains is something hollow, more mausoleum than actual marketplace. For some of you out here watching this, you probably remember they were the cathedrals of late 20th century America. Vast indoor worlds where teenagers found independence and where families strolled on Sunday afternoons. This was where the American dream was packaged and placed on shelves. But as online shopping replaced the experience, many of these monuments began to die off. Slowly. Painfully. Leaving behind empty husks that haunt the edges of our cities. Tonight, we explore 3 items that converge at a crossroads of memory, dread, and malls. A surreal 80s film, a strange dream phenomenon plaguing multiple people, and honestly, one of the weirdest events and deepest rabbit holes I've seen in a long time. Welcome to a very, very special episode, our 3rd volume of Darkest Entries Around the Internet, the Morbid Mall Edition. You know, honestly, that sounded way more stupid than I thought. God damn it.
Trending story on CBSMiami.com.
It involves talk of alien sightings at Bayside Marketplace.
It's New Year's Day, 2024. The location is Bayside Marketplace, Miami. But what is set to transpire that night is more mystery than magic.
Dozens of police officers swarming Bayside Marketplace tonight.
That's where we find Local 10 crime specialist Bridget Matter live with what sparked this chaotic scene. Bridget.
And chaotic isn't under.
It's an open-air shopping center along the waterfront in downtown Miami, about 5 miles from South Beach, and it would become the epicenter for arguably one of the weirdest events in recent times. It was early evening, and the marketplace was filled with people celebrating the start of a new year. Families strolled along the bay, tourists browsed the shops, the energy was alive and festive. Then, chaos erupted.
And grand theft.
Now, according to Miami police, it started with just a simple fight. It was a large group of teenagers, numbering between 50 to 100, who started an all-out brawl-fueled pandemonium inside the marketplace. They were accused of setting off fireworks, and loud ones at that sounded more like gunshots echoing through the open corridors. The noise, reasonably, caused immediate panic, and people started running, assuming that there was an active shooter. The police response was massive. Dozens of police cars descended on Bayside Marketplace. The streets were blocked off and shut down by rows and rows of patrol vehicles. Officers flooded the area, and some reports claim that all available Miami patrol units were called to the scene. Overhead, according to witnesses, helicopters circled. When all was said and done, 4 teenagers were arrested, and the official story from the police was nothing more than a juvenile disturbance caused by fireworks causing panic. That's not why we're here to talk about this tonight, however.
This is the footage we have from the Miami alien encounter that happened 2 years ago.
I was there at the Bayside Mall with my family, and we all saw exactly what happened.
Within hours of the incident, videos began circulating on social media. Shaky cell phone footage showing the overwhelming police presence, aerial shots of the marketplace surrounded by emergency vehicles, and then, lo and behold, buried in that grainy, low-light footage, people started seeing something else. Tall, moving shadows. Now, before we get too deep into this, frame-by-frame analysis of these videos seem to show figures, impossibly tall figures, 8 to 10 feet in height, walking among the police cars and near the entrance to the marketplace. Reasonably, the internet exploded. Hashtags involving the incident trended globally. Posts claiming government cover-ups set social media ablaze. Conspiracy theorists proposed that police weren't responding to teenagers at all. They were responding to something wholly not of this world. The theories proliferated faster than most involved could react to. Some claimed the teens had opened a portal, others insisted they had witnessed 10-foot-tall gray creatures attacking people in the shopping area, holograms, you name it. The Miami Police Department was forced to issue multiple statements, and on January 5th, Officer Rafael Horta addressed the alien claims directly in a video posted to the department's Instagram account.
What happened was there was about 50 or more juveniles that were shooting fireworks at people. There was also some looting going on, so officers that were on that scene were having a little bit of trouble containing it, so they called what is called a citywide 3, which every officer in the city responded. That's why you saw so much police presence for that call to contain that crowd. Now, there is now video going viral of 8 to 10 foot aliens walking around Bayside. It's actually just a person walking with a shadow. So I can confirm to you all here today right now that there are no aliens in Miami, in Bayside Marketplace at the moment.
A pretty emphatic statement. No aliens, UFOs, anything like that, but to no one's surprise, this only stoked the flames of conspiracy. You see, here's the thing that stands out and makes the Bayside incident different. First off, the police response itself was pretty large considering the circumstances. Even skeptics acknowledge that the number of officers deployed seems pretty disproportionate to just an average teenage brawl. It's a question that kind of lingers beneath all the alien theories. Why was the response so overwhelming? Why were all available units called to handle what was just officially described as teenagers fighting and setting off fireworks? The obvious explanations, fireworks sounded like gunshots in a post-mass shooting America, it triggers mass panic, that makes sense. The large crowds would require extreme crowd control, and the New Year's Day timing meant officers were already on high alert. The videos really took off because, again, mass hysteria, and in all that low-light, grainy footage, people started spotting the figures and the shapes that may have not actually been there or simply just have been shadows. The more you stare, the more you want to see something that truly isn't there. The aliens in the videos, again, likely nothing more than shadows cast by the intense emergency lighting or simply artifacts of compression. But then there are inconsistencies within the details. Multiple witnesses did report that the atmosphere inside Bayside felt off before the fight even started. There are claims, again, unverified but persistent, that some of the teenagers arrested that night told interrogating officers that they weren't fighting just to fight, but that something had frightened them, that they'd seen something in the marketplace and panicked. Again, these claims have not been officially confirmed and probably never will be, and the arrest reports mention only the fighting and the fireworks. And what about the footage itself? Those who have analyzed the viral videos maintain that while most of the alien figures can be explained away, there are a few frames, again, just a few, where the shapes don't really match any reasonable explanation. These people are careful to note that the low-quality video can create all sorts of inconsistencies and artifacts. However, they also acknowledge it is incredibly strange, so again, do with that what you will. The Bayside Marketplace incident has become somewhat of a modern urban legend. It's a perfect storm of viral media and a lot of unanswered questions. It's been analyzed multiple times and just dissected to death in Reddit threads. However, through all that, Bayside Marketplace simply just returned to normal the next morning, as if this was just, again, another fever dream. Stores came back online, tourists returned in droves, the waterfront glimmered in the Florida sun as it always had. But in the darkest corners of the internet, these questions persist. New theories come out. Because if it happened once, if something other than teenagers and fireworks drew that police response, then it could happen again. The officials say there were no aliens, but they also couldn't explain why so many people who had never met, who had no reason to coordinate their stories, all describe seeing the same thing. Just shadows, they say. Just a trick of the light. Just your mind playing tricks in the chaos of a party-fueled night. Unless, of course, it truly wasn't.
Let's see here. Okay, we're walking through the mall.
There's definitely more to this.
Welcome to Mall World, a place that might not even exist in physical reality, but that thousands of people claim to visit regularly in their dreams. It's a shared dreamscape that's become one of the internet's most fascinating and unsettling phenomena. Now, the term Mall World first emerged around 2016 on an internet forum called Godlike Productions in a thread titled "Anyone Frequent Mall World in Their Dreams?" An anonymous user from Canada described the recurring dreams of a surreal shopping mall and wrote, "I've taken to calling it Mall World." The thread itself grew exponentially to almost over 2,000 replies. People who had never met, all describing remarkably similar dream experiences. And by 2019, the phenomenon had spread to 4chan's paranormal board, where users reported the same exact details. Infinitely massive malls, impossibly steep locations, and underground tunnels connecting to other dream locations. Then, in early 2020, probably synonymous with the liminal space movement, Mall World exploded on mainstream social media. A subreddit called r/the Mall World formed, dedicated entirely to people sharing their experiences. And again, the consistency in their claims is what made this incredibly weird. People who have never communicated with each other describe the same specific features. The escalators, always described as absurdly deep, extending far longer than should be physically possible. Some dreamers report escalators that seem to go on forever, climbing at angles that would be impossible in waking life. Stairwells that lead in circles, corridors that bring you back to where you started, doors that either don't exist when you need them or open to places that shouldn't connect. The mall almost feels like a trap designed to keep you wandering. The strange elevators is another example, often lacking walls or proper floors, control panels that only have up and down buttons with numbers descending into impossible sublevels, basement levels that couldn't exist in any real building. Some even report elevators that open onto service corridors, abandoned hallways, or areas filled with stored food that never decays. The lighting is also inconsistent throughout the spaces. One wing might be bathed in the half-lit gloom of a dead mall. Another section might be hyper-saturated with arcade lights and neon signs that seem too bright, almost hostile in their intensity. And then there's the food court, a central gathering point that appears in many accounts, and some describe it as populated with people who feel more like scenery than actual conscious beings. Others report it as completely empty, with restaurant stalls still displaying menus but no food available, or food that your hand passes through as if it's a hologram. Many dreamers report that Mall World isn't really isolated, but it connects to other reoccurring dream locations. A school world, a library world possibly, a theme park world, hotel world, pool world. Secret passageways and underground tunnels that lead between these spaces as if they're all part of the same impossible geography. Jessica Tilton, a content creator, created a map based on her own dream experiences, and it resonated so deeply with the rest of the community because it matched with what thousands of others had experienced independently. As reported by the New York Times in October 2025, people reached out to her claiming they recognized specific locations in her drawing. The placement of the food court, the configuration of the escalators, and the areas that felt familiar despite never having been discussed publicly before. Now, theories about Mall World vary wildly. I'll defer to our good friend Carl Jung, you remember him from prior videos, right? And his concept of the collective unconsciousness. The idea that we all share a deep layer of the mind filled with universal archetypes that shape how we think, dream, and behave. Under this interpretation, Mall World kind of represents a modern archetype. The mall, after all, was a defining feature of late 20th century American life. For Gen X and millennials especially, malls were formative spaces, places of independence, first jobs, dates, hangouts. The architecture became embedded in our cultural memory. Mall World may connect to a real-world anxiety that many of us share. Anxieties about consumption, purpose, and more esoteric theories propose that Mall World exists as a literal location on the astral plane, accessible only through dreams. Some lucid dreamers claim they've conducted experiments attempting to meet each other at specific locations within the world, particularly the food court, which serves as a common anchor point. And no shit, it all leads back to another thing. Liminal spaces. Come on guys, did you really think I wouldn't make another video about that? The rise of liminal space aesthetics and internet culture has intersected within Mall World's popularity. Liminal spaces evoke those feelings of nostalgia mixed with uncanny dread, and it feels like I'm a broken record on this channel at this point with explaining that. But again, they're in-between places, and Mall World embodies this perfectly. It's familiar, yet it's wrong. It's comforting, yet incredibly isolating. One person described an encounter that seemed to suggest other dreamers were aware of the shared nature of this area. A man with a big hat, for instance, who, when followed, turned and said, "We do this alone. You need to find your own way out." Reddit user Lucid Dreama posted about flying to a different mall than usual in their dream and noticing that the people in the mall seemed to become more aware the longer they talked. It was like this overwhelming sense that these weren't just NPCs. Then 2 security guards came walking over to me, and I had a real sense that I should probably stop talking about this. They made it clear that I shouldn't know this information and needed to leave immediately. These accounts suggest something stranger than simple shared symbolism. Perhaps the most important thing to understand about Mall World is this. It's not actually about the malls. As users on r/the Mall World clarify, Mall World dreams don't have to involve shopping centers at all. The most popular images shared on this subreddit aren't even that of malls. They're really of any liminal space, any location that evokes the specific feeling of being between states, between purposes, between the familiar and the uncanny. A parking garage at 3 a.m., a hotel hallway with identical doors extending into the distance, a swimming pool in a basement that shouldn't exist there at all. In a way, this is Mall World in the broader sense, experiences that feel more realistic and more impactful than ordinary dreams. Skeptics offer straightforward explanations. Malls are common spaces in life, so it's not surprising that they'd appear frequently within our subconscious. The similarities in accounts could be explained by shared cultural experiences, and hey, we've all been to malls, we've all seen the same layouts and the same stores, but the consistency is still striking. The emotional impact on those who experience it is very, very tangible. Medium writer Candice Darden, exploring her own Mall World experiences, described recurring dreams of a night market labyrinth, street vendors offering samples, handmade toys and trinkets. She described it as being almost like a late-night market in Tokyo, but you never know exactly where you're at. These are usually pleasant dreams, and I'm happy when I can disappear into that world. For others, mall world might be less pleasant. The inability to find exits becomes frightening. The sense of being watched and trapped and navigating spaces that shift and change when you're not looking, it all transforms the experience into something closer to a nightmare. Jessica Tilton, whose map started the latest wave of attention, maintains a measured perspective. I think that we live in a spiritual world, and that there's a lot we don't understand and we're not supposed to understand. It's important that we don't go into mass psychosis over this. Yeah, pretty fucking sound advice, I guess, but anyways, the question remains. Is mall world a psychological construct? A modern archetype emerging from our collective relationship with consumer culture and liminal spaces? Is it simply the brain processing familiar environments in similar ways across different individuals? Or is it something else? A shared dream space that exists in some layer of consciousness we don't yet understand? A place where the boundaries between individual minds become permeable in sleep? Tonight, when you go to sleep, you might just find yourself there.
This one here smells great. Which one?
In 1983, filmmaker Cecilia Condit created a short experimental film that would become a cult classic in the worlds of video art and, to a degree, analog horror, called Possibly in Michigan, and it runs for approximately 12 minutes. And in those 12 minutes lies some of the most unsettling imagery ever committed to a VHS tape. On the surface, Possibly in Michigan appears to be a surrealist commentary on gender violence, toxic masculinity, and the predator-prey dynamics between men and women. The film follows two women in particular, Sharon and Janice, as they navigate a world where a dangerous man stalks them through mundane suburban spaces, including prominently a shopping mall. There is something, however, about this film that transcends its message, and it's something that has caused it to circulate in underground horror communities for a long, long time. The stalker character, identified only as Arthur, wears a crude mask, not a sophisticated horror movie prosthetic, but something that looks handmade and almost childlike in construction. He follows the two women through a shopping mall, through suburban streets, and through the mundane spaces of everyday life. The mall sequences, however, are particularly unnerving. Arthur appears in the background of shots, partially obscured by crowds or displays, but he's always watching. The women shop for perfume, browse clothes, normal mall activities, while this masked figure observes them from a distance. There's one scene in particular, and yes, you probably know which scene I'm talking about, where Sharon stands at a cosmetics counter testing lipstick while humming along to the music, and in the mirror behind her, we can see Arthur standing completely still among the moving shoppers. She doesn't notice. It's as if he's not even there. As the film progresses, the violence becomes more explicit. The woman ultimately turn the tables on him in a sequence that is both cathartic and horrifying, culminating in an act of cannibalism presented with the same casual cheerfulness as the earlier shopping scenes. The final image of the film shows the two women, having defeated their stalker, sitting at a table eating what is implied to be his flesh. Holy fuck, what did I just watch? Possibly in Michigan was screened at various experimental film festivals throughout the 1980s and 90s, and it was never widely distributed, but it developed a dedicated following amongst those who worshiped the underground. Then, the film was uploaded to YouTube. The film gained renewed attention when it was uploaded, introducing it to a generation raised on internet horror, specifically analog horror. Newcomers flocked to the comments section, trying to figure out what made the film so deeply unsettling, and it transcended more than the violence or the cannibalism itself, because plenty of horror films feature these elements. It was the tone itself, and the way that the film presented horror, and the way it suggested the violence could emerge from the most ordinary moments of daily life. Though its themes hit incredibly hard, such as toxic masculinity and domestic violence, there is one theme in particular that I do want to touch on in regards to Possibly in Michigan, something that impacts us all. It understands something fundamental about commercial spaces, and these are places that are meant to be safe. They're meant to be clean and monitored and well lit, and we're supposed to let our guard down, and yet violence happens in these spaces all the time. And that's where the film's genius really lies. It's the collapsing of boundaries. It makes it so effective in horror. What makes this film particularly relevant to mall horror is its treatment of the department store as a site of surveillance. Arthur watches Sharon and Janice shop. He follows them through the aisles. He's tracking their routines, their patterns. He's looking for vulnerabilities. It's a place designed for visibility, but it becomes the perfect environment for stalking. But there's another interpretation, and it's one that the film seems to encourage through its very structure and aesthetic. Possibly in Michigan might be tapping into something deeper than just the specific location where it was filmed. In the film, violence emerges from the most normal of settings. The stalker doesn't appear in a dark alley, he appears in a mall. The most everyday spaces become sites of predation. This tells me exactly why Possibly in Michigan has endured. It's not just about the violence or the gender dynamics, and it's a film about the horror hiding in plain sight every day. The danger lurking in the fluorescent lit aisles, the predator watching from across that food court in the mall. This film suggests nowhere is safe. The stalker is always there, somewhere in the background, wearing his crude mask, watching and waiting. And when you leave the mall, when you walk through the parking lot, how do you know he's not there? How do you know he's still not following you? Remember, Possibly in Michigan is and has been for a while available to watch online, and you can watch it right now if you want. I really suggest watching this because it was a really, really cool short film. But the people, again, who've watched it report that same curious scenario, that they'll be in a mall weeks or months later just shopping, wandering around, and they'll see someone across the concourse, someone standing still while everyone moves, someone whose face they can't quite make out. And just for a moment, they might remember that film. They'll remember the mask that Arthur wore, and they'll remember Sharon's humming at the cosmetics counter, oblivious to the danger behind her. They might even wonder, is this how it all starts? Oh, man. Malls were meant to be eternal, and not literally, of course, but in the way that they embed themselves into the American landscape and our own subconscious. The mall was where you went to see and to be seen. Teenagers fell in love there, families spent their Sunday afternoons there. It was consumer satisfaction created in a kind of secular cathedral. Again, nothing is eternal. At least not really. Malls have begun their slow death. And now, as they empty, as they close their gates and shut off their fountains, they become something else entirely. They become the perfect architecture for the eerie presence of absence. These stories we explored tonight, the Bayside Marketplace incident, all-world phenomenon, Possibly in Michigan, each approach this liminal space from a different angle, but they share one common thread. The recognition that these places, designed for specific purposes, become strange and unsettling when those purposes disappear. What happens to a space built for thousands of people when only one person walks through its corridors? Well, they wait. They persist. Malls create this strange and unique form of haunting. It's not a ghost in an old house, nor a spirit in an ancient forest, but something modern and strange. The ghost of shopping past still playing its Muzak, still running its escalators, and still maintaining that illusion that somewhere, someone is buying something. As we move forward to a future where physical retail becomes increasingly optional, we're left these empty husks, and in their emptiness, in their silence, they ask us a question. What will happen when the spaces we built to contain our dreams outlive the dreams themselves? Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Darkest Entries. The next time you find yourself in a mall, especially an old one, I know a lot of you daredevils out there would probably be interested in doing that, pay attention to the spaces between the stores. The malls remember, even when we forget. Look, I'm not gonna lie, that sounded really stupid for an ending, but on that note, check this out, guys. Merch is up. Got a really, really big video on the horizon. We're making a return back to analog horror. So I hope you guys are excited for that. Again, I know that the last video outside of Darkest Entries was kinda lackluster, but I just needed to get it off my chest and speak my piece. So I do hope that those of you that really liked it stay with me. I hope you guys like this one a lot. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Love you all very much. Have a good night. Stay weird.